LiSTNR production.
The death of Megan Kalajzich on January the 27th, 1986 in Fairlight, New South Wales is one of the country's most infamous murder cases, marked by a chilling contract killing orchestrated by her husband, Andrew Kalajzich. Megan, a 44-year-old mother of two, was shot twice in the head as she slept beside her husband in their family home, an act that shattered the veneer of their prosperous life on Sydney's northern beaches. Kalajzich, a wealthy hotelier and respected community figure, was convicted of hiring a hitman to carry out the murder, a crime driven by personal motives and executed with calculated precision. The case unfolded over years of investigation, an 11-week trial, and subsequent appeals, captivating the Australian public with its mix of wealth, betrayal, and justice. I'm Dan Mullins. This is Crime Insider's Judgement, a deep dive on a judge's final verdict of a crime and what transpired to incite that judgment. Megan Carmichael was born in 1941. She met Andrew Kalajzich, the son of Yugoslav immigrants, and the two married in 1962 when they were both 22 years old. Megan, a former dental nurse with a passion for ballroom dancing, transitioned into the role of a supportive wife and mother as her husband built a successful career. They had two children, Michelle born in 1964 and Andrew Jr. born in 1966. The family settled in Manly, where Kalajzich's business acumen transformed their modest beginnings, rooted in his family's fish and chip shop, into a flourishing empire. By the 1980s, the family epitomised success on Sydney's northern beaches. Kalajzich was elected president of the Manly Chamber of Commerce in 1972 and, in 1983, opened the Manly Pacific International Hotel, a 5-star beachside property inaugurated by then New South Wales Premier Neville Wran. Megan stood by his side during these achievements, attending social functions and raising their children in a luxurious mansion. Despite their outward prosperity, evidence later revealed strains in the marriage, including Kalajzich's infatuation with other women, notably his executive secretary, Marlene Watson, which would become a pivotal factor in Megan's death. If we go back in time to 1966, Kalajzich, then 25, opened a fish and chip shop and a seafood restaurant in Manly with his brother. Megan worked at the restaurant. At the same time, Kalajzich began a fiery affair with one of his staffers, Marcelina Ullman, a Yugoslav girl from South America. According to evidence provided to the New South Wales coroner's inquest into Megan's death, Ullman headed back to Brazil for a year to get away from Kalajzich, as he was a married man and their relationship was doomed. Miss Ullman returned to Australia in September 1973. 3 days later, a snapshot of what was to play out in the mid-80s occurred on a suburban street in Fairlight. Kalajzich was driving his wife and young son along Commonwealth Parade near their home. The road travelled a stretch along the harbour and the verge fell away to a 10-metre drop onto rocks and the harbour foreshore. Kalajzich told police he felt sick. Instead of stopping the car and putting on the handbrake, he jumped out the driver's door. Kalajzich left the car speeding towards the cliff, where it careered over the embankment, coming to rest at the bottom of the cliff on the rocks. Police said, had the car not followed the curve of the roadway, it would have ended up submerged in the harbour. Megan and the couple's son were uninjured. Kalajzich was taken to hospital by ambulance, suffering from shock. Miss Ullman continued her relationship with Kalajzich, but ended it after he proposed to her, but didn't turn up on the day he said they'd marry. 10 years later, he was pursuing his personal assistant. In the mid-80s, Kalajzich became infatuated with Marlene Watson. Evidence of their close relationship surfaced, including a letter of endearment from Marlene Watson addressed to Kalajzich that was intercepted by police. However, it remains uncertain whether this infatuation was the driving force behind the suggested motive that Kalajzich wanted to kill his wife Megan to marry Watson. While the romance provided a possible explanation, the evidence that unfolded painted a far more definitive picture. Kalajzich was determined to have his wife murdered, regardless of the exact reason. Kalajzich's first misstep in his sinister plan was openly expressing his desire for a rifle and a hitman. This reckless broadcasting of intent, as seen in many similar murder cases, compromised the secrecy of his scheme. Once he involved others, the information inevitably spread. People told people who told more people until it eventually reached the ears of the police. What began as a private plot quickly unraveled due to his lack of discretion. In late 1985, Kalajzich approached Warren James Elkins, the manager of his disco, with a request to procure a weapon, claiming he felt threatened. Elkins, a man with a minor criminal past limited to a juvenile theft conviction, complied without hesitation, providing Kalajzich with 3 different weapons. It was then that Kalajzich revealed his true intention. He wanted to bump someone off. Elkins, seemingly in awe of his boss, took on the task of finding a hitman. His first attempt led him to a King's Cross prostitute who knew someone, but the contact failed to show up at the arranged meeting. Undeterred, Elkins turned to his friend Trevor Hayden, who shared a flat with Franciscus Wilhelmus, or Bill, Vandenberg, a part-time grocer and foundry worker. Through this chain of connection, Vandenberg met Kerry Neil Orrock, who in turn introduced him to George Canellis, a reputed hitman also known as Noel Sherry. Canellis agreed to carry out the hit for $30,000 with a $5,000 discount if the weapon was supplied, and demanded an upfront payment of $5,000. Elkins informed Kalajzich that the arrangement was in place, at which point Kalajzich disclosed that the target was his wife, Megan. He provided Elkins with a rifle, a silencer, $25,000, Megan's address, and a description of her car. Elkins passed the rifle, victim details, and $5,000 to Vandenberg, who then handed them over to Canellis. Canellis spent a day shadowing Megan in Manly, observing her movements. However, upon seeing her, he grew suspicious. As he later told New South Wales Detective Sergeant Robert Inkster, he came to the conclusion that the murder was likely domestic in nature, either tied to drugs or personal relationships, and since Megan showed no signs of drug involvement, he concluded it was the latter. Sensing trouble, Canellis backed out, returning the rifle and silencer to Vandenberg, but keeping the $5,000 deposit. His withdrawal from the job left Vandenberg in a precarious position. Kalajzich demanded the deposit back, and Elkins pressed Vandenberg for Canellis's identity. Frightened of Canellis and under pressure, Vandenberg suggested he might take on the job himself. Elkins seized on this, offering an additional $10,000. However, Vandenberg was inexperienced with firearms and faced logistical challenges, such as entering an unfamiliar home with unknown occupants. On the 11th of January 1986, just 16 days before Megan died, Vandenberg made his first attempt at the hit, approaching Megan as she got out of her car at Fairlight Crescent. But he forgot to cock the rifle. In a panic, he struck her over the head with the gun, breaking the silencer, and fled as she fell down a flight of steps. Fearing he'd been spotted, Vandenberg discarded the rifle in the Lane Cove River. Kalajzich, outwardly sympathetic to his wife's assault, was privately frustrated that he couldn't locate the broken silencer in his garden. Tellingly, he made no effort to bolster security against further attacks, signalling his continued intent. He instructed Elkins to push forward with the hit. Orrick procured another .22 caliber rifle from Kanellis, and Kalajzich provided Elkins with a cash check for over $1,300 for Vandenberg to buy more silencers. Vandenberg then flew to Adelaide for the purpose of buying new silencers. Elkins provided the ticket for the flight, with funds provided by Kalajzich. The plan evolved. Kalajzich would leave a door unlocked, allowing Vandenberg to enter at night and shoot Megan in bed. Initially, they considered shooting Kalajzich in the leg to deflect suspicion, but they settled on him simply rolling off the bed during the attack. Vandenberg's early attempts were thwarted by unforeseen obstacles. Once he entered the house only to find Kalajzich's son awake and watching television, forcing him to retreat. Kalajzich, undeterred, told Elkins to relay a firm message to Vandenberg. No matter who gets in the way, he must carry out the task. On another occasion, Kalajzich left a door unlocked, but his mother-in-law, May Carmichael, who was staying over, locked it, blocking Vandenberg's entry. He claimed to have tried 4 times, each effort foiled by circumstance. Coming up, what happened in the early hours of January 27, 1986. Just after 1 a.m., the day after Australia Day in 1986, after numerous foiled attempts to kill Megan Kalajzich, Bill Vandenberg succeeded. Entering through an open door, he reached the bedroom, fired twice into Megan's head, and shot twice into Andrew Kalajzich's pillow as he rolled out of the bed. He then fled, accidentally discharging the rifle as he removed it from his car to dispose of it in the Lane Cove River. Kalajzich, by his account, checked on his mother-in-law and son, called an ambulance, and attempted to stop Megan's bleeding. Elkins later claimed Kalajzich handed him $20,000 in a briefcase, with Vandenberg paid the following day. The $20,000 was left in a room booked in Elkins' name in a North Sydney motel. The key to the room was to be left in Vandenberg's letterbox to be picked up after completion of the contract. At Megan's funeral, Kalajzich played the grieving husband convincingly. The police investigation initially stalled until Kanellis, growing paranoid, contacted Sergeant Kevin Woods, a trusted New South Wales CIB detective. Worried that his rifle may have been used and traceable, and fearing he knew too much and could become a target himself, Kanellis told Woods the whole story. On February 14, 1986, Elkins, Vandenberg, Orrick and Kalajzich were arrested and charged. Secret meetings were held between Kalajzich and Elkins, allegedly involving other prisoners, aimed at suppressing or destroying incriminating evidence. On July 25, Elkins, Vandenberg and Orrick were committed for trial on conspiracy to murder charges, but the case against Kalajzich was dismissed by Magistrate Greg Glass, who deemed the evidence against him mere suspicion and conjecture. Kalajzich took a trip to Yugoslavia and returned home, hoping to remain clear of any charges. But as the evidence was re-examined, Elkins and Vandenberg began to crack. On December 18, Kalajzich was rearrested and charged with conspiracy to murder, attempted murder, and murder. On May 15, 1987, Elkins pleaded guilty to conspiracy, securing immunity from the graver charges, and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He served 3 years and was released in October 1989. He then commenced a new life with his family under a new identity. Vandenberg admitted to conspiracy, attempted murder and murder, receiving a life sentence. Kalajzich and Orrick faced trial, where the combined testimony of Elkins, Vandenberg and Kanellis left little room for defence. On the 25th of May 1988, both were convicted and sentenced to life. Vandenberg later took his own life in prison. Kalajzich's legal battles continued. In 1989, the High Court refused an appeal. In 1992, a New South Wales Supreme Court application for a judicial inquiry was dismissed as fantasy. Kalajzich has always maintained those responsible for the murder of his wife were in conspiracy with senior police officers who participated in a scheme to destroy him. Radio broadcaster Alan Jones championed Kalajzich's innocence, launching a high-profile campaign that led to a 1995 inquiry by retired Justice John Slattery QC. After 117 days, Slattery upheld the conviction, finding no doubt of Kalajzich's guilt and citing his manipulation of evidence. The $5 million inquiry reaffirmed the prosecution's case. In 1997, under truth in sentencing laws, Kalajzich's life sentence was adjusted to a 25-year non-parole period with a maximum of 28 years. A 1998 appeal against this term failed. By 2005, desperate for release, Kalajzich offered to donate a kidney to the state government, an offer rejected by then Attorney General Bob Debus. Another failed attempt to have his charges dismissed was launched in the wake of allegations against New South Wales detective Raymond John Peaty. Peaty had been convicted of corruption. Kalajzich's legal challenge was on the basis that Peaty had been involved in the investigation into Megan's murder. He had typed out a statement provided by Elkins, but didn't give any evidence at Kalajzich's trial. There was also so-called new evidence found. A statement from a woman named Jan Windsor, who worked at the hotel, had been discovered on a CD-ROM and had not been heard in evidence previously. That statement, read by an actor.
I have been working at the Manly Pacific International Hotel for about 3 years. At the beginning of 1986, I had been there for about 10 months, having commenced in May of 1985. I knew Andrew Kalajzich as the owner of the hotel. I remember a weekend in January of 1986. It was the night, in fact, that Mrs. Kalajzich was killed, and I saw him about 1 hour or so before she was killed. It would have been about 11 p.m. I finished work at 11:30 p.m. I remember Kalajzich coming into the back office to check on the hotel. He came in to check on the hotel whenever he was out for the night. This was his general practice. On this night, he was very happy, laughing and joking with us like he normally did. He was a friendly, happy person with staff. He knew the staff by name. It was like a family business. I remember someone began to clean up, and Mr. Kalajzich said, "You will never make a wife in Yugoslavia." You could laugh and joke with him. Provided you did your job, he was happy about it. If he was not happy with you, he would tell you. He did not hold grudges. If you had a problem, he preferred you come to him personally to discuss it. He was a marvellous boss as far as I was concerned. If he thought you were wrong, he would say so. If he thought you were right, he would try to do something about it. On the night in question, he stayed about half an hour. I remember that he left the back office while I was there. He went from the back office to the foyer. I did not see him go out the back door of the hotel. I have no recollection of seeing Elkins on that night. If Mr. Kalajzich was involved in the death of his wife, he must be the world's greatest actor.
The appeal was dismissed. The judge presiding told the court, "My conclusion, having considered the competing submissions, is that the content of the statement of Jan Windsor does not occasion me unease or any sense of disquiet in allowing the conviction of the applicant to stand, but that, in any event, the circumstances in which this application is brought enliven Section 474E of the Crimes Act. The matter here raised has previously been dealt with under Part 13A of the Crimes Act, and I am not satisfied that there are special facts or special circumstances such as would now warrant the taking of further action. After serving 25 years in prison, the New South Wales State Parole Authority announced on January the 25th, 2012, Kalajzich, then 71, would be paroled. The Serious Offenders Review Council praised his model behaviour, educational progress and employment history in prison. He was released on February the 8th, 2012, under strict conditions for 3 years, including bans on firearms and overseas travel. Megan's death devastated her family. Michelle and Andrew Jr., supported by Megan's mother, May Carmichael, stood by their father, maintaining his innocence. May, who lived in the Fairlight home, never believed Kalajzich was guilty, nor did Megan's wider family. After his release, Kalajzich lived with family, later managing a modest motel on the New South Wales Central Coast, a stark contrast to his former empire, with Manly's mayor calling her death the day Manly lost its innocence. The case gripped Australia and inspired the book My Husband, My Killer by Lindsay Simpson and Sandra Harvey, and a 2001 TV film. The investigation showcased police tenacity, relying on circumstantial evidence to secure a conviction, though Alan Jones's campaign raised questions about public influence on justice. Legally, it underscored the challenges of prosecuting murder-for-hire cases, where middlemen and hitmen complicate evidence trails. Socially, it shifted perceptions of Manly's elite, revealing vulnerabilities beneath its polished surface. Kalajzich's release in 2012 sparked debate about parole for serious offenders, balancing rehabilitation with victim justice. Megan Kalajzich's death was a tragic unravelling of a seemingly idyllic life, ended by her husband's greed and betrayal. From her survival of a failed hit to her murder in her sleep, the case exposed a calculated plot that shocked a nation. Kalajzich's conviction, upheld through rigorous scrutiny, marked a triumph of justice, yet his parole left lingering unease. Megan's story endures as a cautionary tale of love turned lethal, forever etched in Australia's criminal history. Thanks for listening to Crime Insider's Judgements. We love hearing your feedback, so please rate and review this episode. If you have a case you want us to cover, let us know via Instagram at LiSTNR Crime or TikTok at LiSTNR Crime Team. I'll be back again next Thursday with another case. I'm Dan Mullins. Thanks for listening. This series was recorded and produced on Gadigal land.